People in Sudan take advantage of a truce to flee the fighting that's left hundreds dead and a trail of destruction. International condemnation as Singapore executes a man for involvement in cannabis smuggling. Thousands of Sudanese are taking advantage of a 72-hour truce to flee from the fighting. In Omdurman, near the capital Khartoum, people sought whatever transport they could find to take them away. The fighting between the Sudanese army and the group called the Rapid Support Forces has left some 460 people dead and more than 4,000 wounded, as well as leaving a trail of destruction. In the capital, an arms group has taken over a laboratory where samples of various contagious diseases are kept.
That is extremely dangerous because we have polio isolates in the lab, we have measles isolates on the lab, we have cholera isolates in the lab. So there is a huge biological risk associated with the occupation of the Central Public Health Lab in Khartoum by one of the fighting parties.
The truce is not being fully respected since there was some sporadic fighting during the day on Tuesday. The UN says the situation could lead to some 270,000 people over the next few days seeking refuge in neighbouring countries like Chad or South Sudan. Despite pleas from family members and international calls for clemency, Singapore has executed a man for conspiring to smuggle a kilo of cannabis. Tanggaraju Supaya was sentenced to death after his phone number was linked to a drugs deal. The execution's been condemned by the UN.
The death penalty for drug offences is incompatible with international norms and standards. Countries that have not yet abolished the death penalty may only impose it for the most serious crimes.
Since 2022, Singapore has executed 12 people for drugs offences. It rejects activists' claims that the death penalty has no deterrent effect.
The explosion of a nuclear reactor put Chernobyl on the map for the worst reasons. It's still considered the most serious nuclear accident in history. The memories are vivid 37 years later, and fears of a fresh accident are ever more present since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. The country has 15 nuclear power plants, but the main focus is on Zaporizhzhia. Despite International Atomic Energy Agency warnings, there are daily reports of attacks in the region. Some experts say we're in greater danger now than in 1986.
This situation is in a certain way worse, because first this is intentional, man-made, person-made attack, and it's very difficult to protect the nuclear power plant if the ammunition or missiles hit the wrong place. And then on top of that, power plant is deteriorating with the time. They have lack of spare parts. And all this together, I think that we are heading to the wrong direction.
Nuclear power seemed doomed, but the industry's been given a boost following the war in Ukraine and subsequent energy crisis. France tops the production table with more than 2/3 of its electricity coming from nuclear. Russia's used energy as a weapon against the West, and even Germany has delayed the timetable for closing nuclear power plants. However, in a counter-cycle with much of Europe, Berlin shut down the last reactors this month.
Is really quite a reprehensible action when they are still so reliant on fossil fuels. So in Europe alone, we're seeing France looking to have a new build program, the UK looking to build new reactors, Poland looking to build its first reactors, Netherlands looking again, Sweden, many other countries in Europe are looking now and turning to new nuclear build and also looking to extend the operation of their existing reactors. Germany stands alone in this, and so I think it is a very poor decision by Germany to phase out its nuclear generation and still be so reliant on fossil fuels.
US President Joe Biden has set the stage for a possible rematch against Donald Trump by officially announcing his candidacy in the 2024 presidential election. Biden will be 81 when it comes round, but says it's important to see his vision through.
I wouldn't have been elected to the United States Senate. It's time to finish the job. Finish the job. But I also... Our economic plan is working. We now have to finish the job, but there's more to do. And you're leading the way, shovels in the ground, cranes in the air, factories opening, all those jobs, meaning we created.
On the streets, opinion is divided as to whether the president is in good enough physical shape for another term at the helm.
Older people as well as younger people, if your mind is intact, if your health is good, it doesn't really matter. Your age really doesn't matter.
I think he's too old to run. He may be in good health now, but who knows in 6 years' time how he's going to be. So I think it's time for him to step down.
While Joe Biden so far seems to have little competition from his fellow Democrats, he could of course be up against the inimitable Donald Trump, who does have some rivals on his own team. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has already made her candidacy official, but the biggest danger for Trump and Joe Biden could be Florida's ultra-conservative Governor Ron DeSantis, who's yet to confirm he'll stand. A Russian missile that destroyed a museum in the city of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region of eastern Ukraine claimed 2 lives, the director and deputy director. The attack damaged several other buildings and injured a further 6 people. Ukrainian officials said there was no reason for Moscow to have targeted the museum.
Тут взагалі нема нічого військового, це суто цивільне місце, де зазвичай дуже багато людей. На щастя, сьогодні не було видачі гуманітарної допомоги, тому не було постраждалих, не було людей на зупинці, тому ми обмежилися тією кількістю людей, які відомі станом на зараз.
The search for bodies and possible survivors went on for around 3.5 hours. Kupiansk, which has been the scene of fighting in recent months, was hit by several Russian C-300 missiles on Tuesday morning. Elsewhere, the press team of the leader of the Wagner mercenary group released a video purporting to show Yevgeny Prigozhin touting for more recruits to fight for Russia. The Wagner group is thought to be crucial to Moscow's military efforts in Ukraine, but Prigozhin has, on more than one occasion, been critical of the Russian Ministry of Defense for the lack of results on the front.
The UK Defence Ministry says over April, Russia's average daily casualty rate has highly likely fallen by around 30%. This follows exceptionally heavy Russian casualties over January-March. Russia's losses have highly likely reduced as their attempted winter offensive has failed to achieve its objectives, and Russian forces are now focused on preparing for anticipated Ukrainian counter-offensive. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian forces continued ground attacks in and around Bakhmut and did not make any confirmed territorial gains in the city on the 23rd and the 24th of April. After more than 10 months of Russia's efforts to capture Bakhmut, Wagner Group leader said that the fall of Bakhmut will not change Russia's operational situation on the Donetsk region axis. Prigozhin claimed that Wagner's job is to wear down Ukrainian forces ahead of a possible counter-offensive. On the 22nd of April, the Institute for the Study of War says that Ukrainian forces have established an enduring presence in certain areas of East Bank, Kherson region, but not a bridgehead. On Monday, the think tank issued a clarification saying the Institute for the Study of War does not assess that Ukrainian forces have established a bridgehead across the Dnipro River. The think tank then issued a separate statement regarding coverage of announced upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive operations, saying that it is committed to doing everything it can to avoid compromising Ukrainian operational security or telling the Russians anything they do not already know. The Institute for the Study of War will make no forecasts whatsoever about what Ukrainian forces might or might not do, let alone where or when they might do it. Quote, "We will be particularly careful to avoid statements that might be construed as offering such forecasts in the coming weeks."
The Rana Plaza is definitely one of those absolutely horrific disasters that was a game changer in some ways.
There's a much greater understanding of the need for transparency.
When the 8-story Rana Plaza commercial building collapsed in Bangladesh, killing more than 1,100 people and injuring 2,500 others, the shock felt was accompanied by a sense of dismay for many. Popular brands in Europe had clothes produced in the building and thus indirectly accepted the miserable working conditions for the thousands of employees. Only a few weeks after the accident, brands, trade unions and NGOs agreed on the Accord on fire protection and building safety in Bangladesh.
The Accord is by far one of the most robust mechanisms available for all brands to join, to be able to signal that they want to bring about the best protections available for workers.
Independent safety inspections, training programs and a workers' grievance procedure have saved thousands of lives, and brands in Europe have had to introduce a set of labour rules to ensure strong social protection.
Many of the clothes that we wear are made outside of European legislation in countries that are far less regulated and where labour is cheap, working conditions are not prioritised.
Wages in Bangladesh have increased in the last 10 years but are still well below the living wage. While brands and suppliers have to act, consumers can do their part.
Brands do listen, and if their customers are being very clear, we expect you to deliver on our standards. We expect to be able to shop without having to worry about whether people are safe or paid decent wages or are going to be harassed in the workplace. So consumers speaking up matter.
The European Citizens Initiative, Good Clothes, Fair Play, demands living wages throughout the clothing, textile and footwear industries. If 1 million signatures are reached, the European Commission must decide on new legislation.